Nguyen Van Thiệu, the 5th of April 1923 to 29 September 2001, was the president of South Vietnam from 1965 to 1975. He was a general in the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, became head of a military junta, and then president after winning a scheduled election. He established rule over South Vietnam until he resigned and left the nation a few days before the fall of Saigon and the ultimate communist victory. Biography. Born in Phan Rang, Thiệu was a descendant of the Tran Dinh dynasty of Annamese nobles. Thiệu initially joined the communist-dominated Viet Minh of Ho Chi Minh but quit after a year and joined the Vietnamese National Army of the French-backed state of Vietnam. He gradually rose up the ranks and, in 1954, led a battalion in expelling the communists from his native village. Following the withdrawal of the French, the VNA became the ARVN, and Thiệu was the head of the Vietnamese National Military Academy for 4 years before becoming a division commander and colonel. In November 1960, he helped put down a coup attempt against President Ngo Dinh Diem. During this time, he also converted to Roman Catholicism and joined the regime's secret Cien Lao party. Diem was thought to give preferential treatment to his co-religionists, and Thiệu was accused of being one of many who converted for political advancement, although he claimed to have converted because his wife was a Roman Catholic. Despite this, Thiệu agreed to join the coup against Diem in November 1963 in the midst of the Buddhist crisis, leading the siege on Gia Long Palace. Diem was captured and executed and Thiệu made a general. Following Diem's death, there were several short-lived juntas as coups occurred frequently. Thiệu gradually moved up the ranks of the junta by adopting a cautious approach while other officers around him defeated and sidelined one another. In 1965, stability came to South Vietnam when he became the figurehead head of state, while Air Marshal Nguyen Cao Kentucky became prime minister, leading a junta that ended the cycle of coups with 2 years of continuity, although the men were rivals. In 1967, a transition to elected government was scheduled, and, after a power struggle within the military, Thiệu ran for the presidency with Kentucky as his running mate. Both men had wanted the top job. To allow the two to work together, the fellow officers had agreed to have a military body controlled by Kentucky-shaped policy behind the scenes. The opposition claims that the election was rigged, though an article in Time magazine from 1967 quotes South Vietnamese citizens saying that they thought the election was more fair than any under Diem. Leadership tensions became evident, and Thiệu prevailed, sidelining Kentucky supporters from key military and cabinet posts. Thiệu then passed legislation to restrict candidacy eligibility for the 1971 election, banning almost all would-be opponents, while the rest withdrew as it was obvious that the poll would be a sham. Thiệu won more than 90% of the vote and the election was uncontested, while Kentucky retired from politics. During his rule, Thiệu was accused of turning a blind eye to and indulging in corruption, and appointing loyalists rather than competent officers to lead ARVN units. In 1968, he was caught out by the Tet Offensive due to complacency, and during the 1971 Operation Lam Son 719 and the Communists' Easter Offensive, the 1st Corps in the north of the country was under the command of his confidant, Hoang Shan Lam, whose incompetence led to heavy defeats until Thiệu finally replaced him with Ngo Quam Truong. After the signing of the Paris Peace Accords, which Thiệu opposed, and the American withdrawal, South Vietnam resisted the Communists for another 2 years until the Communists' final push for victory, which saw the South openly invaded by the entire North Vietnamese army. Thiệu gave contradictory orders to Truong to stand and fight the withdrawal and consolidate. leading to mass panic and collapse in the north of the country. This allowed the Communists to generate much momentum, and within a month they were close to Saigon, prompting Thiệu to resign and leave the country aboard an American helicopter. Just before the Communists completed the conquest, he eventually settled near Boston, Massachusetts, USA, preferring not to talk to the media until his death in 2001. Early years. Born in Phan Rang on the south-central coast of Vietnam, Thiệu was the son of a small, well-off landowner who earned his living by farming and fishing. Thiệu was the youngest of 5 children. According to some reports, Thiệu was born in November 1924, but adopted the 5th of April 1923 as his birthday on grounds that it was a more auspicious day. His elder brothers raised money so that he could attend the elite schools run by France, who were Vietnam's colonial rulers. Although not yet a Catholic, Thiệu attended Pellerin, a French-run Catholic school in Hue, the imperial seat of the Nguyen dynasty. He returned to his hometown after graduating. During World War II, Imperial Japan invaded French Indochina and seized control. Ninh Thuan was taken over by the Japanese in 1942, but the reaction from the locals was muted, and Thiệu continued to work the ricelands alongside his father for another 3 years. Viet Minh and Vietnamese National Army. When World War II ended, Thiệu joined the Viet Minh, led by Ho Chi Minh, whose goal was to gain independence for Vietnam from France. With no rifles, Thiau's class of Viet Minh recruits trained in jungle clearings with bamboo. He rose to be district chief, but left the movement after just 1 year. Following the return of the French to southern Vietnam in 1946 to contest Viet Minh control, Thiệu said, "By August of 1946, I knew that Viet Minh were communists. They shot people. They overthrew the village committee. They seized the land." He defected and moved to Saigon and joined the forces of the French-backed state of Vietnam, with the help of his brother Nguyen Van Hieu, a Paris-trained lawyer who served in the upper echelons of the state of Vietnam government. Thiệu initially was enrolled in the Merchant Marine Academy. After a year, he was given his officer's commission, but he rejected a position on a ship when he discovered that the French owners were going to pay him less than his French colleagues. This incident was said to have made him suspicious of foreigners. Thiệu later became known for his paranoia and distrust of his American allies when he rose to the top of politics. Thiệu transferred to the National Military Academy in Ta Lat. In 1949, upon graduation, he was commissioned a second lieutenant from the first officer candidates course of the Vietnam National Army, which had been created by former Emperor Ba Hai, who had agreed to be the chief of state of the state of Vietnam to fight against the Democratic Republic of Vietnam of the Viet Minh. Thiệu started as the commander of an infantry platoon fighting against the Viet Minh. He quickly rose up the ranks, and was known as a good strategist, albeit cautious, with an aversion to attacking unless victory appeared almost assured. He was sent to France to train at the infantry school at Coethquidon, before returning home to attend the Staff College in Hanoi. Nevertheless, Thiệu was regarded as very much a country boy, lacking the manners of more sophisticated urban dwellers who aspired to become officers. By 1954, he was a major and led a battalion that attacked a Viet Minh unit, forcing the Communists to withdraw from Phan Rang. At first the Viet Minh retreated into Thiau's old family home, confident that he would not attack his own house, but they were mistaken. Army of the Republic of Vietnam. Thiệu was a lieutenant colonel when the Republic of Vietnam was founded and officially gained full sovereignty after the withdrawal of French forces in 1955. Following the 1954 Geneva Agreement, In 1956, he was appointed as head of the National Military Academy in Tarlac, and held the post for 4 years. There he formed ties with many of the younger officers and trainees, and who went on to become his generals, colonels and majors when he ascended to the presidency a decade later. In 1957, and again in 1960, Thiệu was sent to the United States for military training. He studied at the Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, and in weapons training at Fort Bliss, Texas, as well as at the Joint and Combined Planning School of the Pacific Command in Okinawa. Role in stopping 1960 anti-Diem coup. On the 11th of November 1960, Colonels Vong Van Thong and Nguyen Chan Thi launched a coup attempt against President Ngo Dinh Diem, but after surrounding the palace, they stopped attacking and decided to negotiate a power-sharing agreement. Diem falsely promised reform, allowing time for loyalists to come to the rescue. The rebels had also failed to seal the highways into the capital to block loyalist reinforcements. Thiệu sent infantry from his 7th Division from Bien Ho, a town just north of Saigon, to help rescue Diem. As the false promises of reform were being aired, Trn Thien Kiem's men approached the palace grounds. Some of the rebels switched sides as the power balance changed. After a brief but violent battle that killed around 400 people, the coup attempt was crushed. On the 21st of October 1961, Thiệu was transferred to command the 1st Division, based in Hue, the former imperial capital in central Vietnam. He remained in the post until the 8th of December 1962, when General Th Cao Tri took over. 12 days later, Thiệu was appointed commander of the 5th Division, which was based in Bien Ho, with the 7th having been moved to My Tho. Diem did not trust Thiau's predecessor, Nguyen Th Thang, but Thiau's appointment proved to be a mistake. Coup against Diem. Thiệu turned against Diem late, and led his 5th Division in the revolt. Late on the night of November 1st, as light drizzle fell, Thiau's tanks, artillery, and troops advanced towards the grounds of Gia Long Palace. A little before 2200, infantry started the assault, covered by tank and artillery fire, which flattened the Presidential Guard barracks. Demolition units set charges to the palace, and rebel flamethrowers sprayed buildings, as the two sides exchanged gunfire. After a lull, shortly after 3 o'clock, the shelling resumed, and just after 5 o'clock, Thiệu ordered the start of the final stage of the siege. By 6:37, the palace fell. He was then made a general by the junta after they took power. Diem had been promised exile by the generals, but after running away from the palace, was executed on the journey back to military headquarters after having been captured. Nguyen Van Minh, the junta and coup leader, was generally blamed for having ordered Diem's assassination, but there has been debate about the culpability. When Thiệu rose to become president, Minh blamed him for the assassinations. In 1971, Minh claimed that Thiệu had caused the deaths by hesitating and delaying the attack on Gia Long Palace, implying that if Diem was captured there, junior officers could not have killed him while in a small group. General Trn Van Thon, another plotter, was reported to have pressured Thiệu during the night of the siege, asking him on the phone, "Why are you so slow in doing it? Do you need more troops? If you do, ask Thin to send more troops, and do it quickly, because after taking the palace you'll be made a general." Quote. Thiệu stridently denied responsibility and issued a statement that Minh did not dispute. Nguyen Van Minh has to assume entire responsibility for the death of Ngo Dinh Diem. Diem remained a taboo subject until Thiệu became president. His regime first approved of public memorial services for Diem upon the 8th anniversary of his death in 1971, and this was the third year that such services were permitted. Madame Thiệu, the First Lady, was seen weeping at a requiem mass for Diem at the Saigon Notre Dame Basilica. Junta member, Thiệu was rewarded with membership in the 12-man Military Revolutionary Council led by General Min, and served as the Secretary-General. The leading figures in the MRC were Generals Min, Trn Van Thon, Le Van Kim and Tun Th Thin. In August 1964, the junta head, General Nguyen Khan, decided to increase his authority by declaring a state of emergency, increasing police powers, banning protests, tightening censorship and allowing the police arbitrary search and imprisonment powers. He drafted a new constitution, which would have augmented his personal power. However, these moves served only to weaken Khan as large demonstrations and riots broke out in the cities, with majority Buddhists prominent, calling for an end to the state of emergency and the abandonment of the new constitution, as well as a progression back to civilian rule. Fearing that he could be toppled by the intensifying protests, Khan made concessions, repealing the new constitution and police measures, and promising to reinstate civilian rule and remove the Cien Lao, a Catholic political apparatus covertly used to maintain the Diem regime in power by seeking out dissenters, etc. Many senior officers, in particular the Catholics, such as Kiem and Thiệu, decried what they viewed as a handing of power to the Buddhist leaders. They then tried to remove Khan in favor of Min, and recruited many officers into the plot. Kiem and Thiệu sought out U.S. Ambassador Maxwell Taylor and sought a private endorsement for a coup, but Taylor did not want any more changes in leadership, fearing a corrosive effect on the already unstable government. This deterred Kiem's group from following through on the plans. The division among the generals came to a head at a meeting of the MRC on 26–27 August. Khan claimed the instability was due to troublemaking by members and supporters of the Catholic-aligned Nationalist Party of Greater Vietnam. Prominent officers associated with the Thai Viet included Thiệu and Kiem. Kiem blamed Khan's concessions to Buddhist activists as the reason for the trouble. Thiệu and another Catholic general, Nguyen Huco, called for the replacement of Khan with Min, but the latter refused. Feeling pressured by the strong condemnations of his colleagues, Khan said that he would resign. However, after further deadlock, Khan, Min, and Kiem were put together in a triumvirate to resolve the problem, but tensions remained as Khan dominated the decision-making. On the 15th of September 1964, Thiệu became the commander of 4th Corps, which oversaw the Mekong Delta region of the country, and 3 divisions. This came after the Buddhists had lobbied Khan to remove General Duong Van Thc from command of 4th Corps. Thc had responded with a failed coup attempt, along with Lam Van Phat, on the 13th of September. During the coup attempt, Kiem and Thiau's torpor, combined with the criticism of Khan, was seen as tacit support of the rebels. U.S. Embassy logs during the coup claimed that Thiệu and Kiem seemed so passive that they appear to have been either tacitly supporting or associated with this move by Thc and Phat. However, after the coup faltered, the pair issued expressions of firm support for Khan somewhat belatedly. Thiệu was part of a group of younger officers called the Young Turks. The most prominent apart from himself included commander of the Vietnam Air, Force, Air Marshal Nguyen Cao Kentucky, Commander of 1st Corps General Nguyen Chan Thi and Admiral Chung Tien Cang, the head of the Republic of Vietnam Navy. They and Khan wanted to forcibly retire officers with more than 25 years of service, as they thought them to be lethargic, out of touch, and ineffective, but most importantly, as rivals for power. Specific targets of this proposed policy were Generals Min, Trn Van Thon, Le Van Kim and Mai Chu Shan. The signature of Chief of State Phan Khacsu was required to pass the ruling, but he referred the matter to the High National Council, an appointed civilian advisory body, to get their opinion. The HNC turned down the request. This was speculated to be due to the fact that many of the HNC members were old, and did not appreciate the general's negativity towards seniors. On the 19th of December, the generals dissolved the HNC and arrested some of the members as well as other civilian politicians. This prompted U.S. Ambassador Maxwell D. Taylor to angrily berate Thi Kentucky and Kang in a private meeting and threaten to cut off aid if they did not reverse the decision. However, this galvanized the officers around Khan for a time, and they ignored Taylor's threats without repercussions, as the Americans were too intent on defeating the Communists to cut funding. Thieu was again plotting the following month when the junta appointed Prime Minister Trn Van Hong introduced a series of war expansion measures, notably by widening the terms of conscription. This provoked widespread anti-Hong demonstrations and riots across the country, mainly from conscription-aged students and pro-negotiations Buddhists. Reliant on Buddhist support, Khan did little to try to contain the protests, and then decided to have the armed forces take over the government, and he removed Hong on the 27th of January. Khan's action nullified a counterplot involving Hong that had developed during the civil disorders that forced him from office. In an attempt to preempt his deposal, Hong had backed a plot led by some Thai-Viet-oriented Catholic officers, including Thieu and Co., who planned to remove Khan and bring Kiem back from Washington. The U.S. Embassy in Saigon was privately supportive of the aim, as Taylor and Khan had become implacable enemies, but they did not fully back the move, as they regarded it as poorly thought out and potentially a political embarrassment due to the need to use an American plane to transport some plotters between Saigon and Washington, and as a result, they promised asylum only for Hong if necessary. The plot continued over the next month with U.S. encouragement, especially when evidence emerged that Khan wanted to make a deal with the Communists. Taylor told the generals that the U.S. was in no way propping up General Khan or backing him in any fashion. At this stage, Taylor and his staff in Saigon thought highly of Thieu, Co. and Kang as possible replacements for Khan. Thieu was quoted in a Central Intelligence Agency report as being described by an unnamed American official as intelligent, highly ambitious, and likely to remain a coup plotter with the aim of personal advancement. Thieu took a cautious approach, as did Co. and Kang, and they were preempted by Colonel Pham Ngoc Thao, an undetected communist double agent, who launched a coup with Phat on a hardline Catholic platform without U.S. backing. With U.S. support against both Khan and the plotters, Kentucky and Thi put down the coup attempt and then ousted Khan. This left Kentucky, Thi and Thieu as the three most prominent members in the new junta. There were claims that Thieu ordered the military to capture and extrajudicially kill Colonel Pham Ngoc Thao, who died in 1965 after a series of coup attempts between various ARVN officers. Other sources blame Kentucky. During this period, Thieu became more prominent as other generals fought and defeated one another in coups, which forced several into exile. Figurehead Chief of State In mid-1965, Thiệu became the figurehead chief of state of a military junta, with Kentucky as the prime minister. After a series of short-lived juntas, the pairing put an end to a series of leadership changes that had occurred since the assassination of Diem. Kentucky and He's military junta decided to inaugurate the rule by holding a no-breathing week. They imposed censorship, closed many newspapers that published material deemed unacceptable, and suspended civil liberties. They then sidelined the civilian politicians to a village of old trees to conduct seminars and draw up plans and programs in support of government policy. They decided to ignore religious and other opposition groups, with the stipulation that troublemakers will be shot. Kentucky and Thiệu were more concerned with attacking the communists than the predecessors. The generals began to mobilize the populace into paramilitary organizations. After 1 month, Thich Tri Quang began to call for the removal of Thiệu because he was a member of Diem's Catholic CN Lao apparatus, decrying his fascistic tendencies, and claiming that CN Lao members were undermining Kentucky. For Quang, Thiệu was a symbol of the Diem era of Catholic domination, when advancement was based on religion. He had desired that General Thi, known for his pro-Buddhist position, would lead the country, and denounced Thiệu for alleged past crimes against Buddhists. In 1966, with Kentucky leading the way, Thi was sacked in a power struggle, provoking widespread civil unrest in his base in First Corps. Quang led Buddhist protests against Kentucky, and Thiệu and many units in First Corps began disobeying orders, siding with Thi and the Buddhist movement. Eventually, Kai's military forces forced the dissidents to back down and defeated those who did not. Thi was exiled and Quang put under house arrest, ending Buddhist opposition and any effective threat to Kentucky and Thi's regime. 1967 presidential election. Under U.S. insistence for constitutional rule, elections for the presidency and legislature were scheduled. On 3 September 1967, Thiệu ran successfully for the presidency with Kentucky as his running mate. Thiệu took 34% of the vote and held the position until 21 April 1975. He promised democracy, social reform and vowed to open wide the door of peace and leave it open. However, the poll was the start of a power struggle with Kentucky, who had been the main leader of South Vietnam in the preceding 2 years. The military had decided that they would support one candidate, and after both men wanted the job, Kentucky only backed down after being promised real influence behind the scenes through a military committee that would control proceedings. Thiệu was intent on concentrating power into his own hands.